So this here is going to be a painting video on how to paint the Lord Discordant, or the Disco Lord. So we did him up in Alpha Legion colors to match sort of the rest of our army. And if you want to paint yours up similar to this, please feel free to stay tuned. Now what we ended up doing with him is we magnetized him according to the previous video we did. So I'll link that in the comments as well as linking it here. So if you want to see how to magnetize him, that gives you your two sets of options, one on the back on the Carapace weapon and one on the front on the Proboscis weapon. So this is him with the other set of weapons. So this has the Bale Flamer on the top as well as the Melta on the bottom. So if you want to paint one up similar to this, we'll show you the steps we did to take it. If you want to see a few more closer up photos of this, skip to the end, and we have a bunch of different ones from different angles there. Aside from that, stay tuned and we'll show you how we painted him up. Leave a comment if you're so interested, leave a like on the channel if you don't mind, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Otherwise than that, stay tuned and we will show you how we painted him up. So this here is going to be our video on how to paint our Disco Lord. So as you can see, we've got him magnetized the same way we did in our previous one we painted, and I'll link to the magnetization video, which you should find here or in the description down below. So we've got him sort of partly assembled. The backpack is off, the rider is off, the two exhaust ports are off as well, and he's not attached to the base. So the first thing we did with our model to get to where we are is we primed it, and we primed it with Mechanicus standard gray spray. And that gave us a nice neutral color because we're going to be painting mostly Alpha Legion. So after we've done the primer, we're going to move on from there to our first actual base coat. So for the first base color, what we're going to do is we're going to put a base layer of Leadbelcher, and we're going to put that pretty much over the entire model. Anything that's going to remain metallic is going to go Leadbelcher. As well, the base coat of all of the Alpha Legion armor is metallic. So Leadbelcher will be over all the plates, all the tail, all the legs, all the extension arms, pretty much everything except for the fleshy bits on the head. Metallics all underneath here. And then the rider will probably do pretty much his armor, legs, arms, things like that. The cape cloth that he's got around him will go a different color, of course. So we'll do that, and then the backpack, of course, will also go metallic, and then most of the guns will be metallic. So we're pretty much going to do Leadbelcher on the entire model. If you have access to the base coat spray of Leadbelcher, that's probably really useful in this case. But if you don't, like I don't because you can't get it in Canada, we're going to be doing this by hand. So we're going to do all this model up in Leadbelcher, and then we'll meet back here in a few minutes, which for me will be a lot more minutes. So we'll do that now, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of minutes. So this is what our model looks like now that we finished with the Leadbelcher. So we did everything you see that's reflective here. So all of these pieces of armor, both pintail weapons, I guess you'd call them, both end pieces, the probe base that the end piece goes on, as well as all the side armor pieces all the way along, all of the whip tail, as well as all of the legs and all of the mechanics underneath, as well as the chest piece and the other side of the head, and then all of the gears underneath each of the legs. We didn't do too many of the wiring. We'll do that after under cleanup. And aside from that, we've got two mixes of stuff here. We've got things that are armor that are going to go blue, and we got things that are metal that are going to stay metal. So each of those will have to be handled differently as we move forward. So the next step is going to be with respect to all of the armor pieces themselves. So that's the carapace here, as well as the shoulder pads, the front pieces of the legs, the armor on the backs, things like that. We're going to do a dry brush of Runefang steel, and that's going to brighten those pieces of armor up quite nicely. just like so. And all we're doing is trying to make that layer a little brighter than the rest. So we'll keep working at that. We're not going to touch any of the tail. We're not going to touch any of the mechanics underneath. That's all going to use a different set with some shades and Nuln oil and things like that. Mostly we're just doing the armor now with the Runefang steel. So now we're finished with our Runefang steel. We're going to move on to the colored part of the armor, because all of the Runefang steel panels are now going to get a coating of contrast paint Terradon Turquoise. And what we ended up doing is we took that contrast paint and mixed it 1-to-1 with medium or water. And what you got was more of a runny glaze. So we're not pretty much dealing with contrast paint any longer. Now we have just this nice glaze. And as you can see, we can put it right in there. Very subtle. Don't worry if you make a mess, because we are going to come back over that trim in a few minutes. But for now, all we're doing is the Alpha Legion panels. And we're putting the base green color down that we're going to be using. So we'll just put it on there. We'll leave it sit. And we'll do all the rest of the Runefang panels. And we'll work our way forward from there. So we'll be back in a few minutes once these are finished. This is what the model looks like now that we've done 2 coats of the Terradon Turquoise. And he's not connected. We just assembled him there just so we could see what it looks like. Everything's still in pieces. But that gives you a good idea of what got painted and what didn't. Just to see which pieces of body armor got done and which pieces of the Hellstrider also got done here as well. What we're going to do now is one last coat. So that's 2 coats of the Terradon Turquoise watered down. We're going to do one more coat of Akhelian Green watered down. And that'll give us the final color of our armor that we want. Now you don't have to do the Akhelian Green if you like this color right here. I just like to add a little bit more blue to it. So we're just going to add just a tiny bit here. And just that taste of blue, I find, makes a really great Alpha Legion color. So you definitely see the difference between here and this piece over here. So, and then once again, because it's a contrast type paint, once you put it on, just leave it. It'll run into the gaps and it'll settle where it needs to be. So there's the 2 colors. And you can just sort of see the difference. That said, any of these are pretty much good the way you have them. I just like this for personal taste. We're going to finish up the model, and then we'll get ready for our next color. So with our armor greenish, bluish color obtained, the one we want, we're going to move on to a different part of the model for now. And we're not going to do the rest of the metallics, because we're going to use those to clean up the edges and things like that when we're all finished. So we're going to move on to the fleshy bits. So that's going to be just the proboscises here at the thing, at the front of the mouth, the head as well. And then we're going to do all that with a base of Rakarth flesh. And while we're at it, we're also going to do all of the skulls on the backpack here. So there's one there, one over here. There's a couple of them around. So we'll do all the skulls. I think there's one underneath one of the feet right here. So we'll do all those skulls with the Rakarth flesh, as well as the fleshy bits of the beast itself. So that's the head, as well as some of these tendons and fleshy bits that's here below the seat. So we'll do all that now with our Rakarth flesh, and we'll be back in a few moments. So this is our model now that we finished with the Rakarth flesh. And as you can see, we did the face, the proboscis, we did the fleshy bits extending up to the seat. We also did some of the chest parts here around this hydraulic, and then same on the other side. So we did those there, as well as the skulls that we mentioned earlier. So with that, we're going to move on to our next color before we shade. and that's going to be to deal with this brain in here. And I think what we're going to use is just some straight up pink horror. And we're just going to do that. And just paint that in like that. So this isn't a base paint, so we won't have the best coverage. So we'll take a couple of coats, but I want it to get a good pink layer in there. So we'll do that 2 coats, and we'll be back here in a few moments. So now that we're done with our pink horror, what we're going to do here now is to shade both that and the Rakarth flesh. We'll do both with some Reikland Fleshshade. And what this does is it's a Reddit-based color, so it'll add some fleshy tones to our skin, as well as some darker reddish tones to the brain. So just like so, we're just going to be very liberal with our amount that we're putting in. And that's why we didn't do anything with the metallics, because we're going to come back and deal with those to clean up everything else later. So going to that chest piece underside here. Just add some of that Fleshshade there. Just like so. And then as that dries, we'll move on to the next color. So now that our shade is dried, what we're going to do is dry brush over that a little bit of Cadian Fleshtone, and that'll bring it a bit more life to it. And it's a dry brush. So we're just going to brush that straight over. Just like that. Same thing with all the eye area. We didn't do the hood yet. We'll do that in a few minutes. So we're not worried about making a mess here. So we'll keep doing it this and then switch down and do the other areas of flesh, and we'll be back here in a few moments. So this is our model now that we've finished with the Cadian Fleshtone, and we've really lit up that face, and we've made it much more fleshy. So what we're going to do now is make it more demon by paling it up a little bit, and we're going to do that with some Pallid Witch flesh. And so all we're going to do is a dry brush of that. And it's a very, very light color, so it's not going to take very much to overpower our miniatures. And we're just going to dry brush that right across. Just like so. So once we've got that finished, we're going to do that for the rest of the flesh, and then we'll meet back here again in a few minutes to move on. So moving on from the flesh, we're going to move on to the cloth here around the rider, as well as the hood on the head of the beast. And so what we're going to do is a series of ever-lightening grays. We're going to start by fixing the base color because it's been contaminated with some shininess and some blue and some things like that have gotten all over it. So we're going to return it to its base color by using some Mechanicus standard gray. And so all we're going to do is just clean up where it got messed up, reestablishing that base layer. So we'll do some of that now. We'll be back here in a few moments. So now that we've got the standard gray base replaced, what we're going to do is add a shade. And what we're going to add is some Nighthaunt Gloom. And that's just going to fill in these little cracks there like so. So we'll put lots of that in there. It'll pool in the ruts. Like so. And add a bit of an ethereal type look. So we'll do that now before we come in with a highlight layer on it. While we're waiting for our Nighthaunt Gloom to dry, what we're going to do is take a little bit of Emperor's Children and just dry brush over that brain there in the back. We'll end up with something that looks like that. So we'll do the same for the other side, and then we'll probably seal that one up. So this is our model now that the Nighthaunt Gloom has dried. And what we're going to do now is add a dry brush of Dawnstone. And we're going to put that right across all of the cloths. And just like this. We're going to very slowly lighten it up. As you can see, it's lightening up slowly. We'll keep working at that till we're finished, and we'll see what we end up with. So there's our model now that we finished with our Dawnstone. And as you can see, it added a little bit of a brownish gray tinge to the cloak. We're going to go one step further and add some Administratum gray. And it's air, just because that's all we had at this time. But the color is still the color, and we can work with that. So we're just going to dry brush that right over that previous color, just to give us one more highlight there, just like so. So this here's our model now that we've finished with all of the previous stages, and we've added the exhaust ports, and we've glued them in place to cover the little brain. So what we're going to do now is finish the metallics that we had did earlier, and what we're going to do is actually shade them. So we're going to take a little bit of Nuln Oil. We're just going to take our Nuln Oil, and we're just going to cover all of these areas here very comfortably. Same as on the Whiplash tail. And that'll bring out any of the details we have here. And then we'll highlight these again in a few minutes. So this is our model so far. And with the Nuln Oil drying, what we're going to do now is add a highlight layer over everything we Nuln Oiled. And so we're going to do that with some Iron Breaker. And all we're going to do with that is just dry brush that over everything that we've darkened. And that'll create the two-tone effect, bringing out the detail, as well as lighting up the highlights. So we'll do that over the exhaust ports, these two big exhaust vents, the Whiplash tail, the gun mount, as well as the autocannon as well. And then the Chainglaive that he's holding, as well as the whip coils on the back of him. And the breather apparatus that he's got, his respirator and things like that. So we'll get all of that done with the Iron Breaker. And then once that's done, we'll meet back here in a few minutes. Now the metallics are finished, it's time to do the most complicated job of all, which is to take some Stormhost Silver and start going over all of the trim. And there's quite a lot of it here. So it's going to take us a little bit of time. You're going to get a nice sharp detailed brush, so I'll switch up in a second. And we're going to clean up all of the trim on the model. Now if you make a mistake, you can fill it in with the contrast paint again, because it does just go over a metallic, so we can hide it. But effectively, you want a nice thin runny layer that you can do all of this trim with. So this is our model now that we're finished with all of our trim finally. And as you can see, it's turned out pretty decent. We've done all three legs, as well as all of the back carapace armor. And then on both sides, extending down and into the tail area. So we've got all that trim finished. We're ready to move on to our next color. So the next color we're going to do is we're going to start with the brown. And we're going to take a little bit of Rhinox hide, which is good for mimicking leather. We're going to do the seat on the back of the beast. And then we're going to do this set of buckles and straps located right here that's holding the mask on in the front. And then we're also going to do the 2 lashes that are allowing the rider to hold on. There's a holster here as well, so we're going to get that. And then the rest of the staff will go brown, and then the 3 pegs holding up the skulls will also go brown. So we'll do all that with just a watered down layer, and we'll be back here in a few minutes for a highlight. So here's our little model now that we finished with the Rhinox highlight. So we've done our base coat for brown. What we're going to do now is a highlight dry brush of Gorthor brown just over those areas. So that's a whole lot lighter. We're just going to dry brush that. Right across the seats. So now that our leather seats are finished and all the other brown leather parts are finished, what we're going to do is the 3 computerized brain systems. In the lore, I think they're removed out of a Land Raider, and they're the machine spirit. So each of these balls represents part of the overall machine spirit housing. So we're going to do all of those with some Abaddon black. So we're going to paint the ball itself black, and then we'll come back and highlight it as well. And then any other little tidbits along the model, if we feel like putting some black on there, we'll do that as well. So our machine spirit is now finished. And as you can see, all we did was made those black. So what we're going to do now is add a highlight to that. So we're going to take a little bit of Eshin Gray, and we're going to dry brush that right across the front there. Just lightly, just to add another layer to that. We're also going to do, with the Eshin Gray, all of these cables down and underneath the machine here. So all of these cables going into the head, all the hydraulic cables, all the cables on the underneath. Otherwise, that most of them are going to go the Eshin Gray color. So we'll do all that now and be back here in a moment. So now we're finished with our Eshin Gray, and what we did was all of our machine spirits, as well as all of the cabling underneath. And in many cases, the cabling was torn, so we put a little bit of Leadbelcher in the torn open areas, just to make them stand out a little bit more. And we did pretty much all the cables underneath the beast here. So what we're going to do now is add a little bit of brightness to the model, and by doing that we're going to bring out some Retributor armor, and we're going to do a few little details here and there, just more aesthetics again. So we're going to do these skull-faced pieces at the end here, the 2 exhaust ports. We're probably going to do any of these medallions hanging down. There's a bunch of spots where there are chains on the front legs, as well as little tiny skulls. We'll probably hit those. We'll do these big side eyes here as well. So we'll do most of those little details throughout our model. On our other fella here, I may redo this skull in gold, as well as some details on the Chainglaive. And then this clip that's holding the cloak in place, we'll probably come back and redo that in gold as well. And then on the backpack, pretty happy with where everything is. There's medallions and things hanging from there. And then the end points in all these whip coils will probably get a gold run too. So that one plus the very large one here. So this is our model now that we finished with the Retributor armor. So we've done the back smokestacks there, as well as the tail, as well as a few little spines and spokes along the way here. And then we did the eyes, and then sort of the same on the other side. So we're going to shade all of that gold with some Agrax Earthshade just to bring the tone back down. And then we'll be back here again in a few minutes as we probably put a highlight in some of those. So our model's coming along fairly well and we're nearing completion. We're going to do a highlight on this skull right here. I do want to brighten it up a little bit because we are Alpha Legion. There shouldn't be a whole lot of gold there, but I wanted it to stand out from the other skulls. So what we're going to do is give a dry brush layer of something like Runelord Brass, which will whiten it up a little bit more and make it a little bit lighter. So we'll do that and we'll be right back. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to just clean up these skulls that we have on the backpack here. And so what we're going to do with those is just dry brush some Screaming Skull over them, as we've done in pretty much every video we've had so far. And just a nice light dry brush there. Make them stand up quite nicely. We're probably going to do the same on the rider's face because I'm finding it a little bit dark. So I'll probably end up with an edge highlight on that one instead, because with the hood we can't dry brush it. So this is what we got when we finish with our Screaming Skull, and I find that makes his skull-like face stand out a little bit better than it was before. So we'll leave it like that and we'll move on to the next colors. So the next thing we're going to work on is our flag, and I think we're going to put it green, but you have pretty much choice of any color you want to use. We're going to go green just to accent some of the color in the armor, just to make it stand out. So the first thing we're going to do in our green flag, and we'll probably also do the tassel here to match, is we're going to put a base on it of probably Cabalite green, something like that. It's a layer paint, so we're not going to get the best coverage, so we may take 2 layers to do it, but we'll start putting that on now. So we're just going to brush that Cabalite green right on, just like so. And we'll do pretty much the whole flag, and we'll meet back here again when it's all nice and dry. So this here's our flag now that our first coat is dried, and what we're going to do here is add a dry brush of something like Sybarite green or a lighter green of some sort. And so all we're going to do with that is dry brush that right over the front, trying to lighten up that flag a little bit. Something like that there. So we'll keep going at that, bring it a little brighter, and we'll be back in a minute. So this is our flag now, and we're going to put one more lightest coat on of Moot Green. This is going to be a very, very dry brush and very, very light because it's a very, very bright color. So make sure almost all of it's gone before we start brushing it on. So we've also been waiting a while to get to our Moot Green because we had other things to do with it. So our Moot Green will also be used for any of the slime drips that are coming down on the front of the model here. And there's one right there, for example. And then there's another one over here. And one more over there. So we'll do those with Moot Green as well. So we've got our Bale Flamer sorted out. And all we're going to do now is add a shade of maybe Quellier Green shade. And we're just going to put that over these spots, just add a little bit of depth, and then that'll pretty much finish off the flamer weapons. And we'll probably do the same on the canisters in the back here as well. So still continuing with our model, we're going to move to a second base color that we had, and it's going to be Uriel Yellow. And we'll do a couple of cables up here with yellow as well, similar to the Moot Green, but mainly what we're using it for is for the engine glow underneath. So we're going to do each of these lines with some Uriel Yellow. We do want to create that engine glow. It's a two-step process. So we'll keep building up our yellow color, do the other side as well as a few of the cables, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So now we're finished with our Uriel Yellow. We did a couple of these cords on the top, and we did the glow on the bottom. So what we're going to do next is take some Mephiston Red, or just any other base red color, and we're going to water it down a lot. Using water or medium, we're going to water it down 3, 4, 5 to 1, something like that. We're basically making a wash out of it, and because it's red, it's very overpowering. But with our wash, we're just going to brush it right over our Uriel Yellow. And then while we're at it, we'll use some straight up concentration to do some of these cables here. So we'll clean that up and we'll be back here in a few minutes once the Mephiston Red is finished. So our model's coming along okay now. We're going to take some Troll Slayer Orange, and we're just going to do the two little eyes in the front of the model here. That may take a couple of coats to get to stand out. In the meanwhile, we'll also do one of these cables with orange. With our orange eyes finished, what we're going to do now is just take a little bit of Temple Guard blue or Lothran blue or any of these primary color blues, and then what we're going to do is just do up the rest of the cabling with blue. To finish off our primary colors. So we'll do that. We'll probably finish the assembly, and then we may even do the base and clear coat it and meet back here when it's all finished. One last thing, we did the instruction as if we were going to keep the head open. In fact, I'm going to add the last armor piece to the head. Because I think I like the way it looks better with the last armor piece on, which is why we wanted to make sure those orange eyes turned out very well. So we'll probably glue that on as well. So this here's our finished model, and as you can see, it looks pretty good. We're pretty happy with the way it turned out. We clear coated it and added the base, and yeah, so it's ready for the tabletop. So if you found this video helpful and you're pretty happy with the way it turned out, or if yours turned out as good as this one, then please feel free to leave a like or a comment, or share this video. That always helps. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like. That's always a big help as well. Otherwise than that, we will see you again in our next painting video.